Jack Whitmore's cabin-style home sat like a crown jewel on the edge of Willow Shores, his private dock stretching proudly into the still lake waters like a finger daring anyone to trespass. He had built it himself 12 years ago, plank by plank after retiring early from corporate law. It was his sanctuary. No HOA nonsense, just lake breezes and trout. That peace shattered the moment he pulled into his driveway and saw them. Strangers. 4 of them. 2 with clipboards, 1 unrolling white fabric along the dock's rails, another fiddling with a string of lights. They moved like they owned the place. "What the hell?" Jack muttered, stepping out of his truck. Before he could say a word, a woman's voice cut through the air like a polished blade. "Oh, there you are. Jack, right?" Karen Melville, platinum blonde, HOA board member, fake smile as wide as the lake itself. She stood at the top of his dock in heels far too high for the planks. She raised her wine glass to him like this was her backyard barbecue. "Karen," he said flatly, "why are there strangers on my dock?" "Oh, I meant to leave a note," she chirped. "We're just doing some preliminary setup for my daughter's wedding. It's next Saturday. Super exciting. I just love your dock's symmetry. And it faces west. Sunset shots are going to be gorgeous." Jack blinked. "My dock?" Karen's smile faltered for a half-second before returning in full force. "Oh, well, under the new HOA guidelines, select community-accessible spaces are being repurposed for shared enjoyment. You know, inclusion and celebration. We all agreed it would be perfect." "No," Jack said, his voice sharp now. "I didn't agree. That dock is on my deeded property. It's not HOA land." Karen sipped her wine and gave a knowing little smirk. "That's what we used to think. But we reviewed it during our informal board workshop and, well, things evolve, right? The community grows." Jack stepped forward. "You've got 10 seconds to get off my property before I start calling the sheriff." She waved a dismissive hand. "No need to be dramatic. It's just one day, Jack. Be a good neighbor." He looked past her at the workers. One was now setting up folding chairs. The fabric was being stapled. The lights were already halfway installed. "Did you even ask me?" Karen gave a soft laugh. "Sometimes if you ask too early, people just say no out of habit. I find it's better to show them how beautiful things can be when we all share." Jack didn't move. His fists were clenched at his sides. Karen leaned in slightly, voice just low enough to be smug. "It's happening, Jack. You can either support the community or make things hard for yourself. And trust me, nobody wins when the HOA gets legal." With that, she turned, waving her wine glass in a sweeping gesture toward the lake as a light breeze tousled her hair. "Can't you just picture it? Sunset, vows, laughter. It's going to be magical." Jack stared at her, his blood pressure rising, watching her descend back down his dock as if she were the queen of Willow Shores. He didn't respond. He didn't threaten. He didn't scream. He just turned, walked slowly into his house, and locked the door behind him. He knew something Karen didn't. He wasn't just angry, he was calculating, and Karen had just started a war on the wrong dock. Jack didn't sleep that night. He sat at his kitchen table with a mug of black coffee and a folder filled with documents, his property deed, HOA bylaws, every letter and notice he'd ever received since moving to Willow Shores. He didn't need to check. He already knew. The dock was his, legally, unequivocally, but Karen's smug little threat still echoed, "Nobody wins when the HOA gets legal." At 7 a.m., he was on the phone with the county assessor's office. 20 minutes later, he had a fresh PDF confirming. The property line extended 20 feet past the shoreline, covering the dock entirely. He printed it twice, laminated one copy, taped it to his front door. By 8 a.m., he was knocking on his neighbor Tom's door, binder in hand. Tom opened, with sleepy eyes and a bathrobe. "Jack, everything okay?" "Karen's commandeering my dock for her daughter's wedding," Jack said flatly. "She claims it's now community property. You heard anything?" Tom scratched his neck. "She mentioned something at the last HOA mixer. Said the board was trying to promote more community events. Jack narrowed his eyes. And by board, she means herself and her brother, probably. Tom hesitated. Look, I'm not saying I agree with her, but she's been steamrolling everyone lately. Got Susan fined for using the wrong mulch color. Jack's stomach turned. That's not enforcement. That's a regime. Tom nodded weakly. People are scared of her. If she wants your dock, she'll find a way. You know how it is with the HOA. They make the rules up as they go. Jack looked out at the lake. The workers were already back, now installing what looked like a gazebo over the dock. Someone had even set up a VIP seating sign on his lawn. Unbelievable, he muttered. She's not even hiding it. As Jack walked home, he spotted a glossy flyer stuck to his mailbox. Bold cursive text read, "You're invited to the wedding of the season." Below it, a picture of a sun-drenched dock wrapped in white linens and fairy lights. His dock. He stared at the flyer, heart thumping with disbelief. Not a single mention of him. Not a whisper of permission. Just full-blown advertising of a wedding. He wasn't even invited to. On his property. That was it. He marched back into the house, opened his laptop, and began drafting emails. First to the HOA board, demanding immediate action. Then to a local land use attorney he remembered from a real estate seminar years ago. Then, just for good measure, he filed a trespassing complaint with the sheriff's department and attached the flyer as evidence. 10 minutes later, his inbox pinged. It was a message from the HOA board's general address. One sentence. Per informal consensus, the use of waterfront assets has been deemed beneficial to the community. Thank you for your cooperation. Jack stared at the screen. His jaw clenched so tight it hurt. They weren't just ignoring him. They were daring him to push back. A cold calm washed over him. Not the helpless kind, but the dangerous kind. The kind that made him a courtroom legend in his old days. Karen had declared war. She just didn't know she was standing on a ticking time bomb. Jack woke to the heavy rumble of trucks and the clatter of tools against wood. The quiet of Willow Shores was gone, replaced by a chaotic orchestra of hammering and shouting. He pulled on a jacket and stepped outside just in time to see a fleet of workers unloading metal poles, stacks of folding chairs, and floral arrangements onto his dock. The dock. His dock. One of the workers glanced up and smiled politely. "Morning, sir. Just setting up for the big day." Jack swallowed his anger. "Who gave you permission to be here?" The worker's smile faltered. Mrs. Melville, the HOA board member." Jack felt the rage building, but he stayed calm. "This is private property. I have not consented." "Look," the worker said, avoiding his gaze. "I'm just following orders." Jack's gaze swept over the scene. A makeshift bar, tables, covered in white linen, delicate chandeliers hanging from the dock's edges. It looked like a scene from a magazine. Elegant, festive, alive. But it wasn't a celebration he'd planned. It was an invasion. From behind a cluster of folding chairs, Karen emerged. Her smile was radiant but cold, the kind that promised trouble. She wore a floral dress that matched the wedding theme perfectly. "Jack," she said, voice sweet but clipped. "I see you've noticed our progress." "Progress?" Jack's voice was sharp. "This is trespassing. I want you to stop." Karen laughed, a light, almost musical sound. "Oh, Jack. This isn't a personal attack. This is community spirit. My daughter's wedding will put Willow Shores on the map." Jack's fists clenched. "You're using my dock without my permission. You're breaking the law." Karen's eyes sparkled with defiance. "Laws evolve. Communities evolve. You can fight it, or you can get on board." She turned and signaled to a man setting up a sound system. "Make sure the microphones are ready. We're starting rehearsals in an hour." Jack's mind raced. The HOA was backing her. The other neighbors were silent, probably too scared to speak up. and the wedding planners acted like the dock was theirs to command. He stormed back inside and grabbed his laptop. He sent urgent messages to the HOA board, demanding an emergency meeting. Then he called the local news station, leaving a message about illegal use of private property. Minutes later, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You can't win this, Jack. Back off before it gets worse." Jack stared at the message. Threats. Intimidation. But instead of fear, a spark of determination lit within him. He wasn't going to let Karen bulldoze him, not without a fight. As the sun climbed higher, the dock transformed into a glittering wedding venue. Karen paced the edge, overseeing every detail, while Jack watched silently from his porch, plotting his next move. The wedding was only days away, and Jack had a plan brewing that no one would see coming. Jack sat in his dimly lit study, the flickering light of his laptop screen casting shadows on the walls. The dock outside gleamed under the afternoon sun, now a full-blown wedding venue, humming with the activity of florists, caterers, and decorators. His sanctuary was slipping away plank by plank. He had tried the HOA board, the official channels, but every call ended in silence or canned responses. No one was willing to publicly challenge Karen Melville, whose iron grip on the community seemed unshakable. Determined, Jack turned his attention to uncovering the truth. He pulled out his phone and started recording as he walked the property. Line, documenting the dock, the construction, the workers wandering where they shouldn't. Then he did something he hadn't done before. He began quietly talking to neighbors. One by one, they opened up, but only in whispers. Karen's brother, "Mark," Mrs. Patterson confided, lowering her voice. "He's on the enforcement committee. Between them, they make sure nobody questions their decisions." "And if you do?" Jack asked. Mrs. Patterson's eyes darted around nervously. "Fines. Harassment. I had to repaint my shutters twice because they didn't like the shade. Got fined over $100 each time." Jack's blood ran cold. The HOA wasn't just corrupt. They were weaponizing the rules to bully. That night, Jack's phone buzzed with a message from the HOA. Notice of violation. Obstruction of HOA event. He opened the attached photo, a blurry shot of him standing. On his dock the day before, arms crossed, watching the setup, $2,500 fine. Pay within 10 days. Jack's jaw tightened. This was no accident. The HOA wanted to break him, he replied curtly, demanding a hearing. The response was a robotic. Hearing scheduled remotely. Attendance mandatory. Jack leaned back and closed his eyes. This was a trap, a cage slowly closing. But Jack was no stranger to cages. He had spent decades navigating legal battles. He knew the law was on his side. And this time, he wouldn't back down. In the days that followed, Karen's presence on his property grew more aggressive. Her daughter's wedding rehearsals echoed from dawn until dusk. Strangers lounged on his, lawn. His mailbox was filled with flyers praising the community event. One afternoon, Jack caught Karen near the dock's edge, whispering into her phone, eyes scanning the horizon like a general surveying a battlefield. "What's the plan?" Jack asked coldly when she noticed him. Karen smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You're tired, Jack. Fighting us will only hurt you. Why not step aside?" Jack shook his head. "I don't scare easily." Karen's smile turned thin. "We'll see about that." That night, as the lake's surface mirrored the starry sky, Jack sat outside, plotting. Karen's threats, the fines, the intimidation, they were meant to wear him down. But Jack had something they didn't. A secret he hadn't revealed. A friend from his past. A skilled boat mechanic who owed him a favor. And a plan to make Karen regret ever stepping foot on his dock. He didn't know exactly how yet, but he knew this. The dock was more than wood and nails. It was his fortress, and he was ready to defend it. Jack knew Karen's bold move to turn his dock into a wedding venue was more than just disrespect. It was a calculated power play. She had the HOA board backing her, the neighbors too scared to object, and now the fines piling up like a storm. But Jack wasn't the kind to back down. He had a secret plan brewing, something to reclaim his dock and send Karen a message she wouldn't forget. The previous night, under the cover of darkness, Jack had made a quiet call. His old friend Mike, a skilled boat mechanic and master of all things aquatic, was on his way. Mike owed Jack a favor from years ago when Jack had helped him out of a tight legal jam. This favor, Jack knew, would come in handy now. By dawn, Mike arrived with a small but powerful motorboat, stocked with ropes, tools, and a mischievous grin. Jack briefed him quickly, outlining the plan. The dock, though officially Karen's wedding, venue was still physically attached to Jack's property, and that was where Mike's expertise came in. The plan was simple, but risky. Use Mike's boat to gently pull the dock out into open water, creating a standoff that couldn't be ignored. It would force the HOA and Karen to face Jack on his terms. Mike chuckled as he checked the engine. "This dock's gonna float, huh? Never thought I'd be part of a dock kidnapping." Jack smiled grimly. "Let's just say it's poetic justice." By mid-morning, the wedding preparations were in full swing. Karen flitted around, organizing, ordering, and basking in her power. She had no idea what was coming. Jack waited until the guests started arriving, then quietly slipped down to the shore with Mike. They attached a heavy-duty cable from the boat to the base of the dock. Mike started the engine, and with slow, controlled power, they began to tug. At first, the dock barely budged. Karen, busy setting up the tables, didn't notice. But then a faint groan of wood echoed across the lake. Heads turned. Gasps erupted. Karen's smile faltered. She raced over, eyes blazing. "What do you think you're doing?" Jack stood firm. "Taking back what's mine." Karen's voice rose, sharp and angry. "You can't just take the dock away from my daughter's wedding. This is harassment." Mike's boat pulled steadily. The dock slowly drifted away from the shore, leaving Karen and the stunned guests stranded. Panic rippled through the crowd. The bride's face drained of color. Karen yelled, "Stop that boat right now!" But Mike held steady. "Not until you understand this isn't over." Back on the shore, Jack's phone buzzed with a text. "You've made your move. This war's just beginning." Jack's heart pounded, but he felt alive. For the first time in weeks, he had the upper hand. The wedding was now truly set adrift, both literally and metaphorically. The morning sun spilled golden light over Willow Shores, casting a warm glow on the white linen-draped dock that now looked like the setting of a dream wedding. Guests in elegant dresses and suits began to arrive, their laughter and chatter filling the air with excitement. The scent of fresh flowers mingled with the crisp lake breeze. Jack stood on his porch, watching through narrowed eyes. Karen flitted, about like a queen bee, radiant in a silk blouse and a skirt that swished as she moved. Her daughter, the bride, nervously adjusted her veil, glowing with happiness, unaware of the storm gathering beneath the surface. The ceremony was scheduled for noon. As the guests took their seats, the string quartet tuned their instruments and the wedding planner directed last-minute details. Karen's smug smile was impossible to miss as she toasted to the unity of our community. Jack's heart pounded, not with excitement, but anticipation. Just as the officiant began the vows, Jack's phone buzzed. He glanced down, then subtly pressed a button. Far from the shore, hidden behind tall trees, a small motorboat idled quietly, tethered to the dock with a thin, nearly invisible cable. At his signal, his friend, the boat mechanic, started the engine. The cable tightened, slowly, imperceptibly at first. Then the entire dock began to shift. A murmur rose among the guests. The dock, Jack's dock, was moving, Whispers turned into gasps. The bride's veil fluttered as a breeze picked up, but it wasn't. The wind that made the dock drift away from shore. It was the boat pulling it. The strings of fairy lights twinkled as the dock floated serenely out into open water. Karen's smile vanished. Her voice cracked as she shouted, "Stop that!" "What are you doing, Jack?" Guests scrambled, some gripping their chairs, others reaching for smartphones to capture the bizarre spectacle. The groom grabbed the bride's hand, eyes wide in disbelief. "Help!" someone cried. The officiant's voice faltered. Karen stormed toward the edge, her heels clicking against the wooden planks, trying to grab the railing, but the dock was already too far. Her voice rose in panic. "This is my event! Call the police! Call the marina! Get that dock back here!" Jack stood on the shore, calm but resolute, watching as the dock drifted into the shimmering heart of the lake, carrying Karen, her daughter, and the wedding party into uncharted waters. Emergency sirens wailed in the distance. Neighbors rushed down to the water's edge, phones raised, murmuring disbelief and confusion. Someone called the sheriff. Jack's phone buzzed again. This time, a text appeared on his screen. "You've crossed the line, Jack. This isn't over." Jack smiled faintly. No, this was just the beginning. The dock floated steadily into the center of the lake, the gentle rocking of the water contrasting sharply with the chaos unraveling aboard. Guests clung to the railings, eyes wide with shock and fear. The bride's veil flapped wildly as she gripped her mother's arm, her voice trembling. "Mom, what's happening?" Karen's usual composure had crumbled. Her lipstick smudged and her nails dug into the wood as she tried to steady herself. "This isn't happening," she hissed, voice shaking. "Jack's lost his mind." Behind them, the groom shouted, orders trying to calm the crowd. "Everyone stay calm! Someone call the marina!" But their phones were useless. The lake was a dead zone, cut off from reliable signal. The reality dawned hard and fast. This was no accidental drifting. Jack had orchestrated this. Back on shore, Jack stood firm, watching the dock become a distant island on the shimmering water. Around him, neighbors gathered, whispering in disbelief. Some shook their heads, others exchanged worried glances. The sheriff's SUV pulled up, lights flashing but unable to act immediately. Inside the sheriff's office, Deputy Lisa Martin picked up Jack's call and was briefed quickly. "We'll send the patrol boat immediately," she said. But on the water, time was running out. The boat tethered to the dock hummed silently, ready to pull or release on Jack's command. His plan wasn't just to send the dock adrift, it was to trap Karen and the wedding party temporarily to force a reckoning. As minutes passed, panic grew aboard the dock. Children clung to their parents. A few guests started shouting accusations. At Karen. "You put us in danger," a man yelled. Karen's face hardened as she tried to regain control, but the situation was slipping beyond her grasp. Suddenly, a sharp snap echoed. The cable tethering the dock to the motorboat had snapped. The dock, now fully untethered, began to drift even further, carried by a gentle current. Karen gasped, eyes wide. The boat mechanic, hiding behind a cluster of chairs, whispered to Jack over the phone. "It's loose. They're truly adrift." Back on shore, Jack's face was unreadable. But inside, adrenaline surged. Deputy Martin's patrol boat was speeding across the lake, but the dock was already 200 yards out, slowly floating away from the marina. "Jack," Lisa said cautiously, "are you sure about this? It's dangerous. What if someone gets hurt?" Jack exhaled deeply. "They'll be fine. No one's in real danger. But it's time the HOA understands boundaries." Back on the dock, Karen was rallying guests. "Stay. Calm! We'll find a way back!" The groom, eyes scanning the shoreline, shouted, "Someone, throw a rope!" A young man grabbed a life vest and tossed it toward the water's edge, but it fell short. Tensions flared, voices raised, arguments ignited. The idyllic wedding had turned into a floating powder keg. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed. A wooden beam snapped under the dock's weight. Gasps erupted. Karen looked at Jack across the water, fury blazing in her eyes. "You wanted to make a point? You've gone too far." Jack locked eyes with her, voice steady. "The dock is mine, and so is my peace." Lisa's boat neared, engines humming. The crisis had only just begun. The sheriff's patrol boat sliced through the lake's calm surface, closing the gap to the drifting dock. Deputy Lisa Martin's voice crackled over her radio, steady but laced with urgency. "Everyone, stay calm. We're coming to get you." On the dock, tension was thick enough to choke. Karen's furious glare never left Jack's distant figure, on shore. The bride, tears streaking down her face, clung to her mother. Guests whispered anxiously, trying to make sense of the surreal spectacle. Just then, a sudden splash near the water's edge drew everyone's attention. A bulky figure emerged, a man in a dark hoodie, clutching a waterproof bag. He stepped onto the dock, instantly silencing the crowd. It was Tom, the quiet neighbor Jack had confided in earlier. He held up a small device, a remote control with a blinking red light. Karen's eyes widened in disbelief. "Jack?" she whispered. From the shore, Jack smiled faintly and raised his hand. Tom stepped forward, pressing a button on the remote. The dock's floating platform groaned as hidden compartments shifted beneath the surface. Slowly, inflatable pontoons inflated beneath the structure, stabilizing it and preventing further damage. Then, with a low hum, cables attached to the dock, previously hidden, engaged. The dock began moving, slowly reversing course toward the shore. Karen's anger twisted into confusion. "How did you—" she stammered. Jack's voice came over the radio Lisa had handed him. "I told you the dock was mine, but I also told you I wouldn't let anyone get hurt. Tom and I prepared for this. This isn't just a dock. It's a fortress, a piece of my legacy." As the dock inched closer to shore, Karen's face fell. The crowd's mood shifted from fear to cautious hope. Lisa called out, "We're ready to help when you arrive." The dock finally touched the shore, the guests disembarking with a mix of relief and stunned silence. Karen approached Jack, her defiance cracked but not broken. "You made a spectacle." Jack looked her in the eye. "And you ignored every warning. This was never about a wedding. It was about respect. Something you've forgotten." A tense pause followed. Then, unexpectedly, Karen nodded. "Maybe it's time we all remember what community means." Jack extended a hand. "Let's fix this. Together," the crowd murmured, watching the unlikely truce. Weeks later, at the next HOA meeting, a new agreement was signed. Clear boundaries for private property use were established. Community events were carefully regulated, and Karen's reign softened. Jack and Karen exchanged a look, no longer enemies, but wary allies. As the sun set over Willow Shores, the dock stood serene once more, a symbol not just of property lines, but of the fragile balance between community and individuality. And Jack? He smiled quietly, knowing he'd protected more than just wood and nails. He'd protected his home,